right, folks, perhaps a little different change of pace. Trumponomics and the Fed. One of the two Kevins will do just fine. That's the subject of the riff. Now, I'm going to leave the Minneapolis situation to President Trump and Tom Homan and other experts who know far more about it than I do. All I wish to do is reaffirm my support for police and law and order. And I want to reaffirm my opposition to left-wing groups who are constantly opposed to police and law and order. Leave that there. Instead, I want to talk about President Trump returning from Davos. And I want to emphasize, first, he is standing on top of the world in terms of American achievements and influence. And second, new numbers coming out today showing that U.S. business investment boom continues to intensify. In particular, a key category, all right, stay with me, non-defense capital goods, excluding volatile aircraft, really the core measure of business investment, is now up at 9.9% at an annual rate for shipments over the past 3 months. That is nearly double the 12-month rate. And new orders up 8.5% over the past 3 months, compared to 5.5% over the past year. These investments cover machinery and equipment and computers, electronics, among others. I'm certain that this surge in what's called CapEx is related to the 100% full cost immediate expensing embodied in the One Big Beautiful Bill that was made retroactive to Mr. Trump's inauguration back on January 20th of last year. It's another example of the massive success of the president's policies. And this goes hand in hand with the pickup of industrial production, both consumer goods and business equipment, and the spurt in GDP, which rose 3.8% annually in the second quarter, 4.4% in the third, and maybe 5% in the fourth, according to the Atlanta Fed. That's right. There is a Trump boom going on, and it's based on his policies. Tax cuts, deregulation, drill, baby, drill, reciprocal free and fair trade. People always say 70% of the economy is consumer spending. Well, that may be technically true, but they miss the fact that when you look under the hood, it's actually business-to-business spending that drive the largest share of economic growth, simply because it's businesses who hire the workers and it's businesses that pay their wages, and you can't have a strong consumer economy unless you have a healthy business economy. And that's why the Trump policies are so foundational. Advancing business investment is also helping to drive a productivity boom. As economist Ed Yardeni notes in his late newsletter, all that capital spending has been paying off by boosting productivity and profit margins. Indeed, corporate profits and margins are running at record levels. That, of course, gives business the wherewithal to hire more and to pay higher wages. So this whole sequence, tax incentives, business investment, productivity, profits, and wages, is blowing up the so-called affordability problem. Basically, it's just good, solid economic growth. And finally, take-home pay, rising roughly 4%, is running well above the recent 1.6% core CPI or the 2.3% core PCE, consumer deflator. It's worth about $2,000 for an average family. So we surely don't want any kind of government shutdown to get in the way of this Trump boom, which is the envy of the world. And we surely do want a new Fed chair who understands what Mr. Trump said at Davos, that economic growth does not cause inflation. The old Fed models believe the economy can't grow at 4 or 5 or 6%, but instead must remain under 2%. Well, they're wrong. So Jay Powell and many of his predecessors would tighten policy and stop the boom. They are wrong. The old Phillips curve model of a phony trade-off between growth and inflation should be mothballed. We have a new world order, Low taxes and deregulation and falling energy prices and rising productivity, all stimulating a boom that is producing more factories and more goods at lower prices. The new Fed chair should embody the new Trumpian economy. Kevin Warsh and Kevin Hassett understand Trumponomics. They can be independent but still understand Trumponomics. But no one can be sure about Wall Streeter Rick Ryder. I want to be fair here, but there is evidence that he somehow donated to the George Soros Act Blue political campaign and variously earmarked contributions to ultra-left-wing Democrats like Sherrod Brown or Hakeem Jeffries or John Tester or the never-Trumper Nikki Haley. Now, this doesn't sound like Trumponomics to me. And if I'm wrong about this information, I will happily recant. But there is FEC, Federal Election Commission, evidence. Why not stay with the best? One of the two Kevins will do just fine. And that's the riff.